What is the better way to grow and develop India's economy? 10 unicorns who make billions, or 10 million entrepreneurs who can change the lives of a billion people?
Are smart and city compatible? Let us see if deconstructing the smart city gives us some answers.
And I would like to particularly speak about the sectoral imbalance in the GDP, the other imbalances that have come around between the center and the state, the imbalances around the bottom of the pyramid.
While over 90% of the economically active individuals globally, including India, earn multiple times in a month, why should they pay equated monthly installment? It makes a strong case to build financial companies to cater to these customers, the Bharat customer.
So, good evening, good morning, namaskar, all of you. I know we have people from the US, Europe, and India, so I have to use all the three words here. And thank you for taking out the time to be with us today for this conversation. My name is Niraj Sharan, and I'm a 1976-1980 batch of Electronics and Communication Engineering. Currently, I'm also the president of the BITOSA NCR chapter. And it's a very interesting conversation today because I have two of my batchmates, Professor Alok Chaturvedi and Professor Niraj Verma. The three of us are on the same batch. And of course, we have Abhishek Sinha as the fourth panelist. I just have to say one thing, because we are amongst friends, that the subject was bottom-up approach. And I know it's evening time in India, and it should not be construed to be bottoms-up, even though it works sometimes. But it's a bottom-up approach. This is being brought to you by BITOSA Global, and as the word BITOSA Global says, it's alumni of BIT Mesra, and just want to share just 30 seconds of my time to explain what we are. We are 100,000 more alumni of BITOSA Global in the world. We have about 100,000 people in 44 countries. We have 24,000 registered alumni that we have captured on our website. We've got about 10,000 on Facebook. We've got about 8,000 on LinkedIn. We have about 8 registered chapters in India and the United States. And our goal this year is to have about 7, 8 more chapters in India. And we're going to have some 7, 8 more chapters in the United States. We're opening up in London and Europe. So by the time we have another year, we should have about 20, 25 chapters. We support fellowship, we support business amongst alumni, and we support our college, and we are looking at ways to make impactful contributions to the society we live in. I'm always very tempted to use some poetic lines. So today's फैज़ का शेर याद आ रहा है मुझे कि गुलों में रंग भरे बादे नौ बहार चले चले भी आओ कि गुलशन का कारोबार चले. So what it means is, it says that is a call out for all like-minded people who feel for the country and community to come together to build your community and the country. And that is why we chose a subject that was so relevant to India's current situation and going forward. And that's why we chose the subject of bottom line and sustainable approach for India. Just to let you know that as we're doing it on Zoom platform, we are live on Facebook. And soon after the webinar is over, we'll go on YouTube and LinkedIn. I request all of you to please, you can take screenshots, you can tag people, and let's have an outreach program that more and more people are aware of what we talked about. We have 3 other panelists. Alok Chaturvedi, you can see him out here, and he's a professor Purdue.
See, this is what is the problem. There's nothing with the computer.
And
The default thing changes.
Abhishek Sinha is the co-founder of the Eko Financial Services in India. Niraj Verma, who is having some technical snag, but I'm sure he's going to get there very soon. He's again a professor and ex-dean, and he's at the University of in Virginia, Commonwealth. And so we're going to have a conversation today. It's not like everyone starts to just keep talking. So I'll start with Alok. I know we all had our first couple of months, first job at Tata Steel. Remember those times?
Yes, absolutely.
Uh,
Yeah, Jamshedpur and, Jamshedpur Technical Institute, so going to JTI. So, yeah, they were fun days.
a good day, 1981. Can you hear us, Niraj Verma?
Yeah, I think I can, but I don't have my headphone. There was some issue with that, but I'm back.
Okay, good.
We were talking about the days that
Great.
that career after college at Tata Steel, and we were remembering our old times of what we did at Tata Steel at that time. So you were also
Exactly.
Abhishek.
Well,
School was a job to be taken, but they didn't take up their job. So all four have some Jamshedpur connection right now. So as we said, we'll have a conversation. So my first question, Alok, is I know you have a very interesting subject matter that you have chosen to talk about this. And I'm your batchmate, so I can use this word. And I'm saying, hey, what the hell is inverted capitalism, man? What the hell is inverted capitalism?
Okay, just a little bit of background to this is that, so I was deeply involved with the military establishment, working with Department of Defense, NATO, and helping. I mean, essentially, the surge strategy in Iraq came about using my platform, and then we were deployed in Afghanistan, and so we were looking at some very interesting way of dealing with it when. When Obama came into office and he threw the baby with the bathwater. And so that was the time I got disillusioned and started looking at what else can I do? Because, the government will always promise to do the best for the people, but they never ended up doing that. So because they were driven by their own compulsions. So I traveled about 30 countries and looking at, what can I do next? Because I was getting ready to sell my companies. So once I sold my company, then I started looking at, that was the time when smartphone was really becoming ubiquitous. So I traveled to a lot of different villages in Ranchi, around Ranchi, and in Jharkhand and in Bihar and some other places. So I came up with this idea, or it struck me. So it was an epiphany at the time that, why not use smartphone in a more interesting way? So as I was looking around, so, I started contemplating because, I was in business school in US. So we live corporate America and multinational corporations. So that is what we train our students for. But looking around, so what do we do? Essentially we have created a Western model, so which is essentially produce and pollute, exploit and profit, and consume and waste. And so that is how we had exploited our planet. Now, as the aspirations among people are growing around the world, so if every person in this world who aspires to live like the average American, if that were to happen, it will require resources of 4 planets. So obviously that is not going to happen. So the idea is we have to completely reimagine the way we grow and develop in India, because a lot of resources has been wasted away by the West, and whatever was remaining is being wasted away by China. And so what are we going to do? So that is when I came up with this idea that why can't we invert the capitalism? Because if you look at the classical IO economics, so what it says is that the wealth is generated by capital and the labor earns wages. So if we can invert that, so that if we can create a mechanism by splitting the labor and the capital and call them both as capital. So you have a human capital and you have a capital. And now if you split that, so rather than you have capital deploying or employing labor, so if we have human capital, so they are entrepreneurs, and capital, which is obviously the entrepreneurs. So if we can create that and create a mechanism, a platform, so Uber-like platform, or so we're sharing economy, so creating or developing a platform-based economy, then we can really invert the capitalism, so that we don't have wage earners, but they are also entrepreneurs where they have an opportunity to grow wealth. So that is the idea, and that is something which we can elaborate on.
Thank you, Alok. I'll get back to more questions for you. I just wanted to have to switch from one subject to the other. And the next, Niraj Verma, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Yeah, very loud and clear. You're talking about deconstructing and smart cities. So my question to you is, like, you talk about that there is a possible conflict, right? You say that there is a possible conflict between smart and the city, right? So what is this conflict? Would you like to clarify and explain what is this conflict between smart and the city? Because we always hear of smart city. We don't think of it as a conflict.
Right. No, thank you. First of all, since I was a few minutes late, my apologies, but also I want to acknowledge the great panelists, my fellow panelists today. So it's an honor to be here, and it's an honor to be part of BITOSA with so many alumni. So smart city, normally we use the words together, right? But in fact, the word smart refers here to a very particular kind of wisdom or knowledge, which is only about internet and computer technologies and so on. And the goal is to make the city efficient using these technologies. Now, historically and traditionally, why do people live in cities? They live there. People from all walks of life come to the city. It's not just for the computer savvy. And people who live there, they comprise poor people, rich people. They come there for amenities. They come there for their airports, for restaurants, for hotels, for large stadiums and entertainment venues and so on. So this demands a certain, what we call a conviviality or a friendship, between people who are living in the city. So the irony is that the more we have diversity in the city, the greater the need for inclusion, right? So that becomes a problem. Now, what the smart thing does is it stratifies our population in cities between those who are computer savvy, those who are not, right? So it creates an additional layer of stratification beyond what even existed. So it adds to the diversity of the city, but in ways by which we think of some people as not being smart. So, for example, elderly parents aren't really not smart in that restricted sense of the word smart, but they're wise. Or people who are in wheelchairs have a harder time, negotiating modern freeways and HOV lanes and so on. So it's very, very difficult. HOV is high occupancy lanes. That means, which they are building in India now. And I was in Bhopal and I saw quite a bit of this happening, where a selective part of the city was designated as the smart city. So by contrast, I'm assuming the other parts were the dumb city, right, which were not smart city. So that's the tension or the conflict.
Okay. No, I understand that. Thank you so much, Niraj. We'll come back to it more details with the subject matter. I move on to Abhishek, Eko Financial Services. I like the way you've defined the word India and Bharat, and I think it has a very, very deep connotation. And so, why do you claim and why do you say that we don't have financial companies in India currently geared up to cater to the Bharat side of India, right? I mean, we've got banks, we've got NBFCs, we've got so many other financial institutions, and yet there is a very significant portion of Bharat, as you say, we don't have institutions or platforms to serve them. So what is it that you want to talk about that in a little bit more detail?
Sure. Thank you, sir. I'll actually take from what Alok sir mentioned. And really in India also, entrepreneurship has been in our genes for generations now. And the big challenge is that there are a lot of people in our country who are not earning on a monthly basis and a consistent amount every month. While most of us in this group, for us, it may be true, but for a lot of people, well over 90% of these economically active individuals actually earn multiple times in a month. Now, your and my credit card rotates every 45 days because we earn every 30 days. And so why doesn't it rotate, say, 45 by 2 or 45 by 4 for somebody who's earning every 15 days or every week? Or 45 by daily for somebody who's earning daily? And that is what is missing in our country. There are, in bits and pieces, this does get answered for, let's say, farm loans. So there are some financial products, but largely the way the banks are structured and the way their unit economics work, and hence the shareholders' expectations are set, it is still not geared to cater to a customer who expects no deficiency in service, but of course a service which is lot more affordable. And that requires a very different structure, very different technology, very different structure, very different business model to cater. And that is a very big missing piece, the lack of, so capital market penetration in our country is in single digits. Insurance is maybe higher single digits. Even access to credit for the economically active individuals and small enterprises is very, very limited, maybe slightly in the lower double digits. So these are very, very small numbers. And hence, it is because of this gap or deficiency in how the financial companies are structured and their shareholders' expectation is set that we are not yet geared. And hence, I like to just stay there because I want people to understand that there is a gap and we must recognize that.
Thank you. Thank you, Abhishek. I mean, I'm sure we'll have more conversation in our second round of questions. And so taking what all three of you have said about the current situation, I have that I am going to talk about a little bit of the sectoral imbalance and the interventions that we need to do at this point in India. I have always been advocating that the way our GDP has been structured so far, that, you know, we're talking about an agricultural contribution of 13% to the GDP. We have about manufacturing, which does about 23-24%. And our services is about 61%. And I've been saying this for quite some time now, that if you look at the employment gateway in these sectors, that, you know, while agriculture is 13%, it deploys 44% of the employment. And in manufacturing is almost equal, 23% of GDP percentage and 23% of employment. Whereas in the services sector, we have 61% of GDP and only about 31% employment. I think it is a little bit a challenge considering the demographic of our country, that if we need to go forward and accelerate the growth with inclusion, that we need to change this pie chart and add interventions in the agricultural and in the manufacturing sector more than what we are doing in the services sector, so that we can have a stable country where we have employment and GDP growth coming all together at the same time. So that's my first sectoral imbalance, but, you know, I'm very happy that we are more or less addressing that kind of question to this thing. Coming back to Alok, we've talked about inverted capitalism. Everything is topsy-turvy now. So let's go further. So while I understand that in theory it makes sense, but as you know, when the tire hits the road, you know, how do you implement this inverted capitalism in a country of 1.1 billion people?
Again, thanks, Niraj. See, if you look at the whole ecosystem of entrepreneurship, so I would say that ecosystem of of entrepreneurship, you can look at it at 5 different levels. The lowest level, or it's a pyramid. At the lowest level, you have the grassroots level entrepreneurship where people are based on livelihood. So people, especially in Jharkhand, where they have minor forest produce, so they pick it up and then try to sell that and make a livelihood of that. Then above that, there may be a skill-based entrepreneurship. So that is where someone may be a carpenter or a mason or someone, so where they have some skill and then they build entrepreneurship around that. Then the third, so these are at the grassroots level, then starts your traditional entrepreneurship. So some of them may be need-based. So for example, if there is no Thai restaurant in the town or the city, so you start your business with a Thai restaurant. And then above that, so that is where the universities come in. So that is where most technology and process-based entrepreneurship. So that is what gets the most play. That's what people always talk about. But the other 3 layers, they just assume that that is going to happen. And then on the highest level, so that is where you see all those unicorns, so where they there are some unique ideas and a lot of venture capital starts pouring in, and so that develops into a major business. So if we are focusing on those last 3 layers, and if we want to make that into an inverted capitalistic model, so here we need a platform. And so it is not that people are not skilled and they don't have the ability to be successful entrepreneurs. So it is the lack of opportunity. So what would be the market creation mechanism? So the reason why Uber works, the reason why Airbnb works is that someone took the pains to develop a platform. So that is what I experimented with my research institute, Institute for Social Empowerment through Entrepreneurship and Knowledge, so which I direct at Purdue. So here we try to do 5 things. So how do I can give access to knowledge, like what and how they should produce things. The second thing is access to talent, that, where do they need to go to get help? Because, obviously most of these people, they are not college educated. So they may be, like in India, they are, the people who I was targeting was 4th grade or less educated women. Then the third thing is access to capital. And so that is what Abhishek is doing. And so we can have some interesting conversation on the model which we developed. Is called mentor investing model. So that is something which we can talk about. And then the 4th thing is access to the market. How can you give them access to the market? Because if someone is producing something and they don't have access to the market, then obviously, so like in India, for example, all these microfinance companies, so they have failed. The reason for that is that they produce something, the market wasn't generated for them, so they did not have access to the market. And finally, access to the technology. So this is where the second major innovation which we try to bring in. So rather than the traditional model of livelihood entrepreneurship is that give them just the minimum technology so that they can work. So if many of you from Ranchi, if you had gone to Jharcraft, so what they're doing is, so they are using local artisans to produce certain things. But there what you'll see is, they produce some magnificent products, but some of them are really, really high quality and most of them are mediocre or bad. So the high quality one gets sold at a premium and then the rest they do not sell. And so obviously government starts to run into problems. So our goal is, how can we bring in high-end technology? Because by providing high-end technology, you can, with training, what you can do is you can improve the quality of the product. And so that is where we have developed some models. So I'm going to talk about that, if you are interested in the next round.
Thank you, Alok. That was very insightful. I come back to Niraj Verma, picking up on the conflict that you talked about between the smart and the city. But how do we resolve this, Niraj? There is a conflict, there is an opportunity, and while we are talking about the conflict, how do we resolve this, Niraj?
Difficult. Oh, okay. So I thank you. So thank you, Niraj. This is an easy as well as a very difficult thing. I agree with what you said in terms of balancing sectoral kind of output, right? Different sectors, and with what Alok was saying about catering to other sides of the pyramid as well, and not just the technology-driven pyramid. That's totally in sync with where I'm coming from. The problem with all this is when we need a balanced approach, history tells us we've never been able to balance anything satisfactorily. Whether it is present generation versus future generations, how do we balance welfare for all? Or whether it is fossil fuels and other kinds of fuels, or renewable fuels versus non-renewable fuels. We've always had problems balancing this. And the same issue is there with the smart city. So we can easily kind of exhort and say that, well, you have to cater to everybody and it should not just be a technology-driven thing. The problem is technology is much more efficient than anything else. And the issue is that technology is a means to something, but because it is so efficient, it becomes an end in itself, right? So having an iPhone is no longer a means to communicate. It is also it's an end in itself. I must have it, right? Even if there is an alternative or not an alternative. So that's the problem with efficiency. If things become too efficient, it becomes an issue. But we want efficiency as well. So what's the solution? One solution is, if we recognize this tension between two things is fundamental, we recognize that the tension between smart and city is fundamental, then whenever we adopt or bias on the side of smart, we have to have policies that aim at the city. Or whenever we look at things in the city, we have to have policies that aim at the smart side of it. So that's the meaning of the tension, or recognizing this tension from a policy perspective. And obviously you have to have budgets that correspond to policies and so on. But it means that it's not simply that we are going to be balanced because we're likely to forget it, right? It'll become the demise of this thing. But it's really about institutionalizing an almost automatic structure, so that if you bias on one side, and you have to bias, because this is a tension, right? You have to bias. If you're biased on one side, you're forced to cater to what you are leaving out. Right? So that's one way. And then we can talk more about it, but it's simpatico with everything else I've heard so far today.
Thank you, Niraj. I go back to Abhishek that, there is always a white elephant in the room, always. And my question was more around this, that with some fintech that we're seeing happening in India, especially with the geopolitical shift, China, an inspirational enemy for India, they've done a lot of modeling. Do we emulate some of their fintech thing, or do we create a Bharat model? Going to the last mile.
So thank you, sir, for asking me that question. And again, my response to this question actually picks up from where Alok sir left, which is to say that what is happening in India is that we have a few companies which have grown very large over a period of time. Now, with large organizations, the challenge is that innovation starts to become slow. And hence, it's important for these organizations to transition to become more like platforms. And when they evolve like platforms, then they don't necessarily, essentially the advantage of building a platform is that you don't take on the ownership of doing all the innovation yourself. A lot of people to participate in the innovation. And so in that path, and specifically to fintech, we have a lot of banks in the country, but we still see such a huge gap, as I previously spoke. And so it is very important for these banks to evolve as infrastructures or platforms, such that a lot of people can start to innovate. Coming to China, I think it is an inspirational enemy to have. Today, it is going to be a good enemy to adopt for innovators and entrepreneurs like ourselves, plus regulators and policymakers. And it is very important to benchmark ourselves. We still have a lot of regulations and policy white papers, which don't really state the vision, especially in terms of metrics or benchmarks. And China is definitely a global benchmark today, especially in fintech. I mean, Alibaba disburses millions of dollars worth of loans in just about 3 seconds. And so it is very important. But coming to the Bharat model, I don't think so that as a democracy, it is easy for us to adopt the China model. And the Bharat model is that, we build public infrastructures, we encourage large monolith companies to open up themselves as infrastructure, and allow for private innovation to happen in extremely large numbers. And that's the secret, I guess, in my understanding, that will be our way or our model to truly innovate and meet those global benchmarks, or especially the benchmarks which China is setting today.
Thank you, Abhishek. I think we'll have more questions for you later. So, I was talking about a sectoral imbalance earlier, where the slice of the agriculture, manufacturing, and the financial and the services, that's the imbalance. The second sectoral imbalance that I feel exists very drastically in our country is the state and the center. I mean, look at Uttar Pradesh. We have 220 million people, 22 crore, and we have about $250 billion as their GDP. If you go down to West Bengal, it's about half the size, 110 million, 11 crores, and they have about $170 billion of the GDP. Go to Bihar, it gets worse. You have, 100 million people, but has only $68 billion of, GDP. So, and if you go to Madhya Pradesh, if you add these couple of states that are currently a drag to the economy, we are totaling 500 million, which is 50 crores of population, and it is doing only $610 billion of GDP. And here we have an ambition of India to be a $5 trillion economy. And my submission to that process is, if UP, as an example, cannot be a 1 trillion economy, India cannot be a 5 trillion economy. So that's the imbalance I bring on the table. And this also talks about interventions and opportunities. While many of us are sitting in big cities, the opportunity and the interventions lie somewhere else within the country. And I really request everybody to look at it differently. So that was the second sectoral imbalance that I was talking about. I'll look back to you. So, okay, we have inverted capitalism. We know how to implement a little bit of it. And let's assume that this works. And we go to execution, it works. But to look forward, how India and the world would look like 10 years from now?
See, if we really, coming back to what Abhishek was saying, so I will link my answer to that. I mean, so you're right. I mean, China has been a so-called role model, but I would say not quite. Chinese model is quite draconian. So I mean, the reason, at one time, Obama asked Tim Cook of Apple that what will it take for you to produce iPhone in United States? And so his answer to him was, we cannot do that. Why? Because what they do is, before the release of iPhones, so China manufacturing, so they will bring in, so they will lock all their employees up. So these are manufacturing cities. So they will live in their hostels. They go and work, and so they have no linkages with anyone, anywhere, not even with their family. So that kind of approach cannot happen in the United States, and that should not happen. And so I mean, essentially, if you just take a look at the opportunity which we have. So just take an example of a Barbie doll. So Barbie doll, which is manufactured in China, so the material cost of it is about 67 cents, and labor cost is about 73 cents, and about 50 cents or so is a logistics cost inside China to the port. So that is so $2 is the cost of each Barbie doll leaving China. And it is sold for $10 in Walmart. So Walmart takes $1 in profit, and Mattel takes $1 in profit. So that is $2 there. So total cost is $4, and the $6 is the logistics. And so now if we grant Mattel and Walmart their margins, so there's $8 per Barbie doll to play with. And that Barbie doll can be produced in the United States using a technique, so the model which we are developing is called factories on wheels. So here we are not going to build large stationary factories, but we will have a network of small factories on the back of a truck. And if you want to get the capacity up, so what you can do is you can network a whole bunch of these trucks together to get the capacity which you're looking for. So instead of labor coming to work, so what you have is you have factory distributed to the labor. So the labor can go in and work. And so this way, what you can do is, so instead of just training people on or employ people in one factory, so now what you can do is you can train these labor on variety of different products. So what will happen is, so the communities become recession proof. So if one industry is in recession, the other industry is still working. And so they will be working on that. So now once you are developing this trained workforce, so you are actually creating an ecosystem. So creating $5 trillion economy, and it is not a big deal. Just target, as Niraj said, just target Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, Bengal, Madhya Pradesh, Rajasthan, all the Hindi heartland, and get their per capita GDP up to $2,000 a year. We are well above $5 trillion. So, and it is not very difficult to do that. The talent is there, the resources are there. It is just the infrastructure which is not there. And so that's why developing these, what I call is manufacturing as a service. And so with factories on wheels, so you can totally get to that point. And so now when Abhishek is deploying his capital, so the people who he's loaning out money to, so they can be creative, they can produce things, but they have the factories available, they have the supply chain available, they have the markets available, everything is available there. So that is the idea of developing this whole infrastructure, which I've been trying to promote. And so we have data to show that it works. Okay. And so the idea, it is not that the government should develop that. I mean, I would be totally wary of that, because the moment government takes it, then all the babus, so I know there are some IAS officers here, but my apologies to them, but there are many of them, they will try to come in and create obstacles rather than removing the obstacles to make this thing happen. And so that mindset has to change, that you have to create this infrastructure. And $5 trillion economy will be a piece of cake.
Thank you, Alok. That was very insightful. I'll take you up on the factory on wheels concept. I think it's very innovative on that. So coming back to my friend Niraj Verma, so we would like to have a little bit insight of what happens in, let's say, the United States or Western countries in regard to the smart cities, and how do they secure opportunities for all in a typical environment of that background. If you can throw some light on that. Just a second, I think you have to unmute him. Yeah.
So somebody did that already. Thank you. So from the 1990s, the smart city has been kind of in discourse in the United States from the early 1990s. The origins maybe even earlier. And then it has gone through a metamorphosis, and it's been called by different names: the wired city, the ubiquitous city, the knowledge city, et cetera, right? So these are very many manifestations, but the ideas are similar. There are significant differences, though, between India and the United States. In India, the smart city project by the government of India was a very central government-oriented top-down effort, very much so. So even the consultants were appointed by the center. The relationship to local government is very minuscule, if at all existent, in the smart city. There are 100 cities planned. We don't know whether they'll come to fruition at all, just given the economy and the ambition. But smart city as an idea has been prevalent in the United States in many different ways. And I'm reminded that one of the professors, one of my own teachers, coined a term which he called wicked problems, the problems that really evade solution, and they don't have straightforward solutions or sometimes any solutions at all. And in some ways, doing something that provides for everyone is about perennial wicked problem, right? So it's hard United States too to provide states that you're seeing now and you've seen before, Occupy Wall Street or now Black Lives Matter and so many others are in some way signaling that the idea of prosperity for all are there or so on. The problems become acute if the links between this are systematic. It's not simply that a small number of people or whatever got left behind, but if the links are systematic. So to correct systematic links, that means that one goes up, then the other's coming down in some ways. To correct systematic links, you need policies that are also systematic. And in the United States now, because some of these policies have not happened, you see these protest movements and so on. So it's a way of arguing for systematic correction in some embedded policies. The US is certainly much more advanced, right? And the level of technology percolation at the level of the household and the individual. But there are still issues with rural areas. In rural Virginia, we don't have high quality internet, for example, right? So the meaning of smart city or smart community and so on is evasive. But in many other areas, the percolation is very high. And, I've been impressed by India in some way that even with low resources, how well they have adopted this internet-based technology at various levels. And this may be a chance to leapfrog in some ways to the future.
Thank you, Niraj. We'll have some questions for you in the last 15 minutes.
Sure.
I talked about sectoral imbalances before, and I want to bring my third imbalance. And that's around the export mix that we have. In India to be close to about $325 billion in export. It actually constitutes to be less than 1.8, 1.9% of the world trade. Compared to our white that's about 12.5%. So honestly, it doesn't matter when the people say that economy is in the world, but we're fighting such a strong fight that India has to grow in the export sector from a mere 1.8% to, if we can go to 4 or 5% of the world trade. That's the third sectoral imbalance that I always look at. Just a case in point, look at Thailand, such a small country. We've got, we have 70 million people there. And just the food export there is about $6 billion. We are 1,300 million people. We do about $35 billion of food. We should be doing a couple of $100 billion of food. So I think, how do we intervene in the last mile to have high yield crops, in the agriculture using some technologies that Alok also is talking about and Abhishek is working on that last mile. How do we help go into that sector and increase the yield using new technologies so that even our water and our environment gets into a more balanced approach is the other sectoral imbalance that I was talking about. So, so we are talking about this last mile intervention, and I'm very pleased to see that all of us are more or less converging onto a sort of an approach that accelerates the growth, hopefully from here. We have what is the time now? 9:14. So we've got 15 more minutes. I think we have 15 more minutes. So should we open the question answer session? Let's have some conversations around questions. So I do have some. It's coming to me through a chat. I'll have to read it off my thing. Is Dr. Ganesh Natarajan here? I'm not sure he's here.
No, sir, he's no longer there
Okay, he's not
right
there.
now.
The other question is, Niraj Verma, for you. And this question has come to me from Ritvik Kumar from Purdue University. And he's probably not here right now, but let me read out the question for you. He says that because of the COVID implications and nations hinging more towards self-reliance and sustainability, how does India as a superpower design steps and plans to attain the so-called self-reliance and not depend so much from the outside world into it? And a lot of people feel that India should decongest our cities, right? And in parallel sustain to second and third grade cities. What are your thoughts on this? How can we decongest the cities and how can we be self-reliant in this whole process of post-COVID? Niraj Verma, for you.
Question. And, historically, there have been two very different ideologies, one of export promotion, the other of import substitution, which now in this current vernacular is called self-reliance, the latter part, right? So they're competing models. It's unclear so far which one works better, right? Albania was the extreme kind of self-reliant model, which really is not talked about very much. China became where it is through a much more open model of export promotion and so on. So the jury is still out on that one. I think politically the waves change and people embrace one or the other, but we really don't know fully how and where it works. I mean, given my own thing, I would rather go with a more open economy than not, but that is still, as I said, the jury is out. Now, in terms of cities, I think that's an intriguing idea and a very useful one. And in some ways, the smart cities in India, in the various phases, there were 4 phases scheduled. The 100 cities were divided into 4, and about, I think, 14 or 13 were fast-tracked. So, but the cities include the tier 1 and tier 2 cities, certainly the smaller cities and so on. So that has been one way. But the problem is that if it's top down and it's controlled by the center and the reporting mechanism is to the center, and there are good reasons to do that, given corruption levels and so on and inefficiencies. But at the same time, the biggest objective of the smart city thing should be to empower people at the local level who can take charge of their cities, who can have pride in their cities, whether they're tier 2 or tier 3 and so on. And that is at risk if we don't have that level of governance where instead of, New Delhi controlling everything, if instead of that, if localities and principalities and municipalities are not really owning the smart city.
Thank you, Niraj. Thank you. Is KK Pandey here? I think he was wanting to ask a question. KK Pandey, 1929 March, working on a Bharat in the academic. There.
Yeah, good evening. This question is for Alok.
Alok Chaturvedi, your question.
Yeah.
What opportunities exist in the small sector, small capex and opex ticket size in this Make in India umbrella presently being focused by the government?
See, there's a lot of opportunities here. So if you look at Atal Innovation Mission and Skill India, Startup India, so there are a lot of programs, and all these programs are primarily targeted towards what I call as a traditional entrepreneurship. So college-based, the employment generation. So they are not really at the grassroots levels, which I'm talking about. So what I'm talking about is instead of, so one of the issues which Niraj has raised is that the cities will always have pressure from migration. And the reason why people migrate to cities are looking for opportunities. But if we can invert the problem and push the opportunities out into the villages and remote area and get them the same level of opportunity through a platform, then it is going to help in a lot of different ways. So like the migration labor problem which we saw just when the lockdown was initiated. So many of those people who have gone back to the cities where they were employed, and so there's a lot of disruption that happens. But so that is where we have to really think outside the box and come up with a totally different model. As I said, we are still pursuing the Western model of development, so trying to bring in these mega businesses and locating it at different places. So yes, I mean that is going to create jobs in those locations, but it is not going to help 250 300 million people who need better employment. So most of them, they are underemployed. So self-employment is the solution, because no one else, government cannot hire them. I mean, military is limited, police is limited. Other than that, what are they going to hire them for? Large corporations, so they are bringing, in order to compete, if we are becoming export oriented, because that is where the growth will come. So if we are becoming export oriented, then we have to automate more robotics, more things. So still it is not going to generate the jobs. It is going to create a lot of billionaires. So again, the issue is our model should not be creating handful of unicorns. I mean, so those things will happen regardless because of the size of our economy and size of our population. But our focus, the government focus, and most of us, so our focus should be how we can democratize entrepreneurship and providing them with a platform that they can self-employ, and they can not just meet the livelihood. So the prosperity comes into in the remote areas of the country. So the motto which we should pursue is prosperity in harmony with the people and the planet. And so that is what we are going to do if we follow the model of the manufacturing as a service. And that should be our motto, not just build large companies and large corporations, because we are going to hurt the environment even more. And I'm sure Neeraj is going to agree with that, because most of the sustainable, one last point here, most of the sustainability model which Europe, uh, so they are so asinine about it, but so pardon my language, but it is less destruction. It is not improving the environment. It is how do you destroy the nature less. That is the only mission which they have.
Got it. Thanks, Alok. I think there'll be more questions that I have for you. Is Divya here? She has a question. Divya is actually leads partnership at ThoughtWorks, and she's an alumni of MIT Sloan School of Management and currently in India, I believe.
Yes, I'm in India.
You have a question for Abhishek Sinha. Over
Yes.
to you. Your question.
So, COVID has actually exposed the cracks in the gig economy, especially the vulnerability of gig workers. So, how do you think the growth of this economy looks like? Will it be stunted? And how do you think this beast will transform? What shape will it take? Because it's not going anywhere. But how do you think it will transform given these kind of stresses? Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Divya, for asking me this question. Actually, just the other day, I was reading an obituary on gig workers. People don't understand that gig entrepreneurs or gig workers didn't happen in the last 5-10 years, but have been there for ages. And it is really on a very strong foundation of entrepreneurship. They may be small entrepreneurs, but they are entrepreneurs at heart. And so I don't think so that we have, of course, the vulnerabilities with gig workers is that we don't have the right access to credit products. We don't have the right insurance products. We don't have the right health insurance products for them. They're just far and few health insurance products. The Prime Minister's couple of insurance products which were launched a few years ago. And so it's very, very limited. And so those vulnerabilities will have to get answered, but I don't think so that you can really kill entrepreneurship. And so gig economy will only flourish. And my take is that, Uber and others have shown the way that when you open up the infrastructure, when you create platforms, when you open up infrastructure, A very simple example is to open up infrastructure with help of APIs, and you shift the burden of innovation from within a large monolith company to millions of entrepreneurs. That's when you see success. And I think that point has been repeated by Alok sir, also by Niraj sir, in their examples of smart city. And I'm a big believer in that.
Thank you, Abhishek. We have one more question from Guneet Swani. Is she there? Can you unmute her?
Yes.
She is an entrepreneur based out of Chandigarh. She runs skill development as well as fashion businesses. And she has a question for, I think, Alok Chaturvedi.
Yes. Thank you, Niraj sir. I just wanted to ask that, can micro entrepreneurship be enhanced by focusing on skill development?
One second, Alok. I think you need to be unmuted.
Okay. Yeah, so I unmuted myself. Okay. Yes, absolutely. I mean, the whole idea about this is, how can we get the people with some skills? So when I talked about the entrepreneurship pyramid. So you have livelihood-based entrepreneurship, then you have a skill-based entrepreneurship. So for example, Pan IIT, so they are developing, so they work extensively in Jharkhand, and they have gurukuls in different parts of the state, focusing on different types of skills. So like in place like Gumla, where they are producing masons. So when we heard that 12,000 laborers from Jharkhand were sent to Ladakh, so it is no coincidence that they used 12,000 labor from Jharkhand, because they were skilled to do certain type of work, and so that is only available, that at that quantity only available in Jharkhand. And after all these migrant laborers went back to Jharkhand, so now you had that kind of population to move to Ladakh to build the infrastructure. So especially people who are not well educated, and with the platform, those skill based. I mean, think of something like in the US we have Angie's List. Okay, so what is Angie's List? Angie's List is a platform, and so where you have the plumbers, the electricians, the masons, the carpenters, so they're all registered to Angie's List, and so now with that platform, so now they have availability. So if I need some work done in my house, I go to Angie's List and look at the rating of all these people with different skills, and I call them. So that type of entrepreneurship will be extremely valuable. You develop the skills through the platform, open the market to that, because otherwise they have to wait for a phone call with someone, I have a leaky faucet, so come and fix it to me. But if a builder is going to build 1,000-room resort, then where are they going to get those skilled labor from? So that's why building formalizing. So you are not. So what platform is doing, you are not taking away those individual skills and the artisanship of the people, but through platform, what you are doing is you are expanding the market for them, and just taking out all the drudgeries of whether I'm going to get paid or not, or all those things. So that becomes automatic.
Thank you. Thank you, Alok. I have one more question. I think it's from Neha Dubey. You're around, Neha. So Neha is a 2007 batch from our college, and she's an IS officer 2015 batch in Gujarat. Neha has a question for Abhishek Sinha. Go ahead, Neha.
Hello, sir. I would like to ask you about this connotation of India and Bharat. So, would you like to throw some light on the scope of entrepreneurship in this regard, sir?
Well, I guess, Neha, you are going to be the one who will speak about it to the rest of us in the next few years. Because
just to add here, I would like to bring to your notice to the entire group of eminent speakers and people who joined here that in the times of COVID, there was a huge shortage of PPE kits, if you remember. Initially, it was a huge shortage, and it was very difficult for us to even get PPEs, and very small things were so costly. And as you rightly mentioned, as Alok sir rightly mentioned, that amongst government and certain other things, it gets cluttered sometimes. Despite that, our district, with the help of Rahul sir here, we managed to train women. It's 21:30. Sakhi mandlis to prepare PP kits, and successfully we could actually use it in our hospitals. And with that regard, I would again give back to you the platform, sir. Thank you.
So I think you have answered it much better than what I could.
No, you want?
Can I? Can I add one thing to that? So no, I mean, Neha, thank you for bringing that point in. So that is the point which I'm trying to make, that if just Gujarat did that, so if there was a platform that could have happened nationwide. So when you have this production capability, which can be switched to different things, so that is what our model is all about. And that is what Bharat is. So, you know, corporate thing is very recent, and Bharat has always been. I mean, so what in another of my speech talks, I talk about, Gandhian economics on steroids, because Gandhian economics is pretty much defunct, and, so it has been criticized heavily. But if you bring Gandhian economics with platform and with technology, it will be a game changer for India.
Okay, thank you. So I have another question from Ben. Is he around? And he's a 1986-90 batch. And he has a question for Alok Chaturvedi. Is Ben around?
Yes, hi.
Hey, John, go ahead. We'll wrap this up very quickly. We're running just...
Yeah, a quick question, Alok. I'm working in the NGO sector and working in villages. So how do you see mapping of technology in the rural economy, so that we could compete in the Indian and even in the world markets?
So, so let's take a simple example of, what happens to the harvest. So once the harvest is done, it is collected and locally, stored locally, and then whatever the MSRP is, if you're trying to sell at that price, so only some portion of that yield is sold at the minimum support price, and the rest are based on whatever the intermediaries are trying to pay. So if we had this distributed model, then at the time of harvest, so the trucks can come in, so the harvest is done, the rice can be thrashed, and it can be separated and packaged right on the farm, and then distributed right away. So if we have that infrastructure, the orders and all those coordination is happening through the technology. So most of the things falls through the crack because there is no coordination of effort. Okay, so someone has to do that, and so that inefficiency can be removed through the platform. So that's why I keep harping on this platform.
Okay, thank you, Alok. We have one last question. Last question. Priyanka Agarwal, Bombay, 1994 batch. I think you have a question. Priyanka, where are you? Are you there? Yeah. Priyanka Agarwal.
Somebody will have to unmute me. Okay. Niraj sir, I have a question for you actually. Okay. And the question is that you were talking about the booting up the agro industry and the manufacturing industry. Do you have any examples, or can you throw some light on how some examples on what are the opportunities which are present in this industry, and how do you see this panning out?
So, it's a new passion for me that I'm looking into, that last mile coming from the engineering sector. But, the agricultural sector, if you look around every year, the yield per acre, the number of people deployed, the amount of water taken, the amount of price we get put together, I see a lot of opportunities in bringing some new technologies around aquaponic hydroponic is already here, but aquaponic, hydrogel-based farming, where in 1 acre of land you can have 40 tons of a produce, or in a 10-tank farm with, in aquaponic, you can have 1.2 million tons of produce. So it deploys, and the ticket size of capital expenditure is less. It's agnostics of the location, because you need to have a greenhouse or some sort of a thing. And the export opportunities are huge. And it is not dependent on weather, monsoon, and things of that sort. So I would think that going the aquaponic way, going the hydrogel film based from Japan and likes of that is very high. And on the manufacturing, this geo shift, political shift from China out, where the United States and most of the buyers are mitigating their buying strategy. If you could get even a portion of that in the light engineering, in electronics, there's a huge amount of opportunities, ticket size $1 to $5 million MSME sector. That's that. So guys, we're out of time. We had a great conversation. I know the word Bharat sticks to me. The smart city conflict sticks to me. And inverted capitalism sticks to me. Sectoral imbalances stick to me. And before we wrap up, I must actually cite some thankful notes to all the team that really brought this together. Chandrasekhar Shah, Neha, all these guys are working 24/7. Neha, we have Ayush Chaturvedi, we have Ayush Dinkar, Sheetal Prateek, Vikas Tiwari, we have Arjun Goyal, Nishan Prateek, we have Balmiki Singh from Calcutta, Devish Dubey. These guys have worked endlessly to bring such webinars to us. I think, thank you so much. We're going to look at some more webinars coming very, very soon. I can only say this in conclusion, that a new India is in the making. So let's just all be part of it. So thank you again to all of you who have been here today, listening and conversing. All the questions that came and we could not respond, all the panelists will write those questions and put them on the website there. So thank you and have a great evening, and thank you for being with us today. Thank you.
Thank you, Niraj, and thank you everyone for making this happen. So, and thank you for all the audience for sharing your time with us.
Yeah. Thank you, Niraj, as well, right, for reaching out and for organizing this, and also Abhishek and Alok and all the people who asked questions. So it's good to be a BITian today.
We'll get you guys very soon. Trust me.
Okay.
It's been a complete honor and privilege for me.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Guys, have a great evening. Thank you.